us. Ciett board member, chair of the Eurociett PA committee. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Bettina Schaller up on stage. Joining her on the stage, we have our eminent panelists, Mr. Shankar Aggarwal, Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India. Mr. Virjesh Upadhyay, All India General Secretary, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh. Ms. Rituparna Chakraborty, President, Indian Staffing Federation. Mr. Denis, Managing Director, Ciett. And Mr. Mekin Maheshwari, ex-head of engineering and CPO, Flipkart. And last but not the least, Ms. Panudda Boonpala, Director, India International Labour Organization. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a huge round of applause.
Well, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to this last session. Distinguished guests, distinguished panelists as well. Absolutely delighted, no doubt, one of the key sessions of this World Employment Conference, which will bring all the previous discussions together and, of course, in a way also close the circle. Notably, Mr. Secretary, you were here in the first session, you're here in the last session, so we will be looking forward to your insights after these 1.5 days. Now, looking at the topic, the key words, of course, very exciting: monitor, enforce, regulation, but most excitingly, private employment agencies. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my particular pleasure to ask the India Director of the International Labour Organization, PIN, to give us an introduction into this great topic and to set the frame, please.
Good morning. Good morning, respected Secretary, members on the panel, members in the audience. Good morning. Could I ask for PowerPoint that was given a while ago? Could you load it on the screen? It's coming, right? Thank you. All right. Okay. Great. As an introduction, I think this is a very important session that we have, even though it's the last session of your very important conference here in India this week. At the outset, from the ILO, we'd like to thank Ciett for inviting the ILO to be part of this conference. But more than that, I'd like to thank Ciett for having been working in great partnership with the ILO for many, many years in this area of work. And as an introduction, when we talk about regulatory framework, I'm sure that you are familiar with ILO Convention number 181, which is about private employment agencies. The way I look at it, this is the convention for you. This is the convention that has been born for your industry. Now, on the first day of your gathering, my ILO colleague from Geneva, Ambassador Nicholas, spoke with you a little bit about the ILO Future of Work initiative. Now, if we look back 20 years ago, in 1997, when this convention was born, we can say that at that moment of time, in 1997, that this convention was the future of work 20 years ago, because that was the time that the issue of public employment services, private employment services came into the debate. And clearly there was a call from member states and from employers and workers organizations who are members of the ILO for this convention. So here we are today. The industry is growing, and this convention remains relevant to provide support, to provide guidance to member states to establish clear policies, to set up a regulatory framework, and to have capacity to implement them in order to support private employment agencies to fulfill its roles in the world of work today. Now, once a convention was adopted, you may wonder what happened, what next. Of course, as a standard practice, member states ratify ILO conventions, but at the same time, not all countries wait until they ratify the conventions before they start applying and look into how to make use of the convention. For that matter, then many countries come to the ILO for guidance, how to go about making use of the principles and the provisions and the guidance that are there in the convention. So the ILO produced a guide, and the guide is around the guide to private employment agencies, regulation, monitoring, and enforcement. And this guide is available on the ILO website. And this guide covers 4 major areas, which is around the legal requirements and how to go about operating the private employment agencies. It's giving some guidance how to go about for government to set up regulatory framework and responsibilities. It also gives guidance on self-regulation, basically where you are. I think you have great experience on how you have implemented quite a number of things around self-regulation, which is around association of private employment agencies and also codes of practice. And Ciett code of practice, of course, is very well known around the world. I think that it has been always cited as an example of self-regulation mechanism. At the same time, the guide also gives a lot of importance to build a relationship between private employment agencies and public employment services. And this is clearly a very important dimension because at the end of the day, both the public and private employment services have to function hands in hand to support the good outcome of employment for job seekers. Now, let me say a few words about this guide. Basically, the guide talks about the need to set up or to have a regulatory framework that apply the standards we set out in the ILO conventions. However, it also have to take into account that when come to application, due regard must be given to suit specific national circumstances and capacities. So this means that the country context in each country that you operate, of course, is important dimension, and then see how best in that context to apply the convention. It is recognized at the outset that actually when talk about regulating the private employment agencies, the industry has so many activities, and it's recognized that the complexity is there, and it's quite a complex task to organize and set forward a regulatory framework. But nevertheless, many countries have done it, and the guide also put forward some country examples that countries which haven't done so, if they are looking for some examples, the guide does include many, many concrete examples. The guide also talks about the fact that the objective of regulating the activities of private employment agencies, it should be to increase the effectiveness of services which are provided by both public and private employment agencies. So basically how to enhance all the service from both the public and the private sector together. So also the guy also talk about the need, if there is a regulatory framework being developed for private employment agencies, there's a need to harmonize these regulations with laws and policies which are in other fields such as the field of commercial practices, the labor law, migration law, public employment services framework that are there already. So basically you talk about harmonization and coherence, that the regulatory framework for private employment agency had to be situated within the existing national legal framework that cover so many important areas of the world of work. Now, what is also important is that if there is a regulatory framework, this is about compliance and monitoring, how to go about it. So one one area that the guide talked about quite a bit is about having effective complaint mechanism and having a system to investigate cases of non-compliance. And this can include specific procedure for job seekers as well, because if job seekers face difficulty in seeking the services of private recruitment agencies, there should be a place for them to make their cases known. The guy also recognized that the market forces change very quickly. So the business opportunities for private employment agencies also have to adjust all the time. So if the regulatory framework have been prepared, there's a need for the regular review so that it is up to date, and adaptation, the modernization, the amendments have to always be there. And there are also, as I mentioned earlier, that why it is recognized that it's very important to have a sound regulatory framework for private employment agencies. At the same time, the safe regulatory system, the voluntary practices, they also play equally important role. Industry standards, they play equally important role. So it goes hand in hand. There is no need to wait until the convention is applied. Basically, the industry can be very proactive to have its own mechanism, code of conduct, and this code of conduct, of course, should also apply the principles of the convention as far as possible. So basically, at the end of the day, what this convention is about is to support the industry to grow, but also at the same time, it wants to make sure that there's a very good balance between supporting the industry to grow and also protecting the rights of workers, those who need the services of the private employment agencies. And around the world today, we feel that there are many, many more examples emerging. There are many countries that keep improving, working on the regulatory framework, look into the monitoring, look into reviewing the practices that are already in place. But one challenge is, one big challenge remains is actually around the recruitment practice for overseas employment. And clearly, how to make recruitment practice works best for workers before they move to work, when they arrive in the destination countries, how to make the system fair, how to make the system works best for the workers, and also for workers sending countries and for workers receiving countries to work together effectively. There are still many challenges around that. And for that matter, at the present, the ILO also is very proactive to promote a fair recruitment initiative. Fair recruitment initiatives is basically looking into how to make the whole recruitment practice for overseas employment works better. And this fair recruitment practice, the ILO is working very closely with multi-stakeholders, government, employers organization, workers organization, but also the whole range of experts who have been working in this field. So these are some of the introductions from my side, and then from the ILO perspective, do not hesitate to contact the ILO offices where you are in case you need further guidance on how to go about applying the principles of ILO Convention 181. In ending my introduction, I must say that I must congratulate Ciett for conducting the study on whether ILO Convention 181 is useful or not. And Ciett's study concludes that workers enjoy more protection in countries which have ratified ILO Convention 181 on private employment agencies. With that note, we are looking forward for much larger number of countries to ratify ILO Convention 181. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pin, for setting the framework of our discussion today. Very useful indeed. And no doubt, will we have a year of celebrations next year, as you said, 2017, 20 years, ILO Convention 181, of course, also, and we'll get to that very soon, 50 years of Ciett. So great to know that we're connected even through these celebrations. Now, you said you didn't want to go, per se, through the ILO Convention, so I guess I cannot resist of doing that, because I wanted to show you in today's era of over-regulation and of very complex texts of regulation, it is actually quite fascinating to see that this ILO Convention spans 7 pages. 7 pages, ladies and gentlemen, and 24 articles. And out of these 24 articles, if you read it, and I really advise all of you to do so because it is very interesting, there's actually only 14 articles which give guidance and direction on the actual private employment agencies and, of course, the protection of workers. The other 10 articles are more directional when it comes to the implementation and notifications. So again, a great read, which we advise you to look at. Now, I would like to hand the word to the Secretary next. Secretary, thank you very much again for being here. Of course, your views are highly interesting for us. Your views on how this ILO convention has been picked up by your administration, by your government. We have heard from Pin that so far certain elements have been chosen out of this convention. So what is it in the case of your government and maybe also the previous ones, which are the points that have been so far identified as the most important to start with? And then if you want to give us a scoop, of course, on possible implementation and ratification, this is the moment. The world press is watching, so don't hesitate. Secretary?
Do you want me to go there or from here?
As you want.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Yesterday, when I spoke from this podium, I told you about the journey of this country in last 65 years after it gained independence in 1947. And I told you about the challenges it faced at that point of time, and that was primarily the kind of governance, the security of the nation, then the problem and the scarcity of food grain, economic growth, and ultimately inclusiveness. And after we had traversed for 65 years, now we have come to a stage when we are the fastest growing economy of the world, in spite of the fact that we are highly pluralistic society, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious, and multi-tiered democracy at the rural level, urban level, and is the most thriving democracy in the world today. Coming to the opportunities today, as again I was telling you yesterday, we have got the advantage of basically 4 Ds. One is basically democracy, and democracy does not mean that everybody has got a right to vote, but democracy means that is the rule of law. And the fundamental rights and the freedoms are enshrined in our constitution. Everybody is equal before law. He or she may be extremely powerful and mighty, but before law, everybody is at the same footing. And that gives an equal opportunity irrespective of caste, irrespective of class, irrespective of color, or irrespective of the social and economic status. Coming to demography, as I said yesterday, that we are the youngest nation in the world, and we take pride because this young group can play the role of engine of growth. But there is one caveat with that, and that is that unless we impart good quality education, and good quality skills, this group of young people, instead of becoming the engine of growth, would become a huge liability for the country. 10 million people are joining workforce every year. And if we do not give them good skills and thereafter good quality of employment opportunities, there will be a chaos and there will be civil rights and civil tension. And then, being a nation of 1.2 billion people, there's huge demand, huge domestic demand within the country. And now the income levels are going up. And they are craving for new services and new goods. And that means huge opportunities for creation of jobs as well. That means it's a beautiful destination and a very attractive destination for people to come here and to set up their units to produce goods and services. And when they do that, they require people. And then there is a role of staffing agency, whether in private sector or in public sector. We are very happy that ILO has produced an excellent piece of convention, which is 181, and that has become a roadmap to create a regulatory framework for all the staffing agencies. And why do we want to have a regulatory framework? Because all these staffing agencies play a very, very important role in the lives of millions and millions of people. Because if somebody wants to live with dignity and self-respect, that can come only through a meaningful and a respectful job. And these staffing agencies can play havoc or they can create a lot of happiness if they do a job very, very diligently and in a very transparent manner. So what we want all these staffing agencies to do, first, that they should be fair to workers and they should be fair to the employer. And secondly, they must create a mechanism so that equal opportunities are given to each and every eligible person, irrespective of caste, community, class, and economic or social status. That is very important. Otherwise, they can play havoc and they can create biases in favor of a particular group or against a particular group. Third, the entire recruitment process has to be absolutely transparent so that people do not have any grudge and people must have abounding faith in the recruitment system and the process. Moreover, the system has to be cost efficient. As somebody said yesterday, that they should not be, I think ma'am had said in the morning, that all these recruitment should mean that there is no cost to the person who is getting recruited. In India, even today, most of the staffing agencies are charging handsome amount of money from those who are applying for jobs through their platform. And that has to be eliminated, not only reduced, but it has got to be eliminated because the cost should go to the employer and not to the employee. And then they have to be accountable to the nation in terms of compliance to the legal process and the legal framework. That means all labor laws have to be adhered to. They got to ensure that everybody is paying the provident fund, everybody is paying money for the social security, and everybody is paying the minimum wages, which is very, very important. And finally, we got to have a regulatory system which ensures that the entire ecosystem of staffing agencies and the recruitment process, whether in public sector or private sector, remains commercially viable. We cannot create a system which is only in favor of the workers so that staffing agencies do not earn a reasonable return on their investment, and ultimately the sector itself will become unviable. And secondly, we got to ensure the competition is also healthy. We should not allow competition to go to an extent that it becomes unhealthy and it becomes a cutthroat competition. Coming to the regulatory framework, what we are doing in terms of this Convention 181 of ILO as you very well know, that we are one of the founding members of ILO. We always look up to ILO for guidance in the area of labor issues, and we are very happy to have this convention as a roadmap. However, before we ratify convention, it is very necessary that we have some kind of a regulatory or a policy framework within the country which has been adhered to and which has been enforced. Only then we ratify a convention of ILO as per our system. And we got a study conducted through our National Institute of Labor, Vivigiri Institute. We have got the report, we are examining that. And idea is basically whether to go for a policy framework or to have some kind of a legal framework. We found that it would be better to go in for a legal framework. And that requires changes in our various rules, regulation, and laws. And as you know, and my colleague over here, he is helping us to get some comfort in the parliament. And once we get that comfort, we will be able to get our legal framework in place. And what we are trying to do, that we want that only reputed and only good quality staffing agencies should be in the arena, and only those should be registered and recognized. And all other who are shady, who are taking people for a ride, and who do not adhere to the legal framework, they should be eliminated at every possible level. We are working on that, and I'm sure that very soon, with the help of my colleague, especially from the labor union, we will be able to make it a success, and we will be able to create a regulatory framework which is not only in conformity with the Convention 181 of the ILO, but which is in the interest of this nation to create many more jobs in the country, and those jobs which are meaningful, purposeful, respectful, and which would bring peace and prosperity and happiness to everyone in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary. And I think there's not many occasions where the world eliminated an elimination gets so many claps. So absolutely agreed on that one. Well, let me now turn, after we've had this excellent insight into what your government is doing, of course, on enforcement monitoring. Let me turn to Denis. Denis, with your daily fantastic service to the community of private employment agencies in the world. Give us a flavor, if you will, of that landscape and what you've seen across other countries as well. I know that obviously Ciett is probably one of the industry bodies that very much advocates for regulation, but it must be good at regulation, right? So please, Denis, how does it look in other places?
Thank you, Bettina. And I'm also very happy and proud to be seated on this podium today. I think I was on this podium yesterday evening, but in a very different framework. I'm not fully sure I remember everything, but I know my good friend Hans, in a few minutes, will probably remind me of things that happened yesterday evening. But nevertheless, I think we should praise the Indians' flexibility and agility to turn a meeting room into an outstanding Bollywood party discotheque, and then back to the meeting room.
Can we please get onto the subject, Mr. Pennel? Thank you very much.
So I think flexibility is a word Indians know definitely. But back to our more serious topic. Yes. Well, to be honest, what I've heard so far from both the ILO and the Secretary of Labor is music to my ears and music to the ears of Ciett, because before talking about compliance and enforcement, I think it is important to know what we are talking about when it comes to regulation. And I cannot but only endorse, again, what said the ILO and the Secretary when it comes to what should be the regulation on our industry. And clearly, and this is something Ciett fully endorses, we need to strike the right balance when it comes to regulation on our industry between, on the one hand, the need to protect the workers, and this is very important, but also on the other hand, to allow our industry to operate and to grow and to develop in a sustainable way. And this is why, as Ciett, indeed, we have been fighting for decades. And this is actually the reason why Ciett was established 50 years ago. This was to lobby, to call for proper regulation on our industry, especially looking at the ILO. And indeed, in 1997, we managed to get this new convention on private employment agencies, recognizing the positive role we play in the labor markets. And this is a big, big achievement from Ciett. We also achieved a similar outcome at the European level when we managed to get a EU directive, which is in a way kind of the transposition of a convention at the European level. So we now have a directive on agency work also at European level. So this is really what we are striving at, and I think at the international level we reach our goals. But now the key question is, concretely, how does that work at the national level? And this is where we see very different situations according to countries. And I would like just to reflect on the panel we had this morning on the BRIC countries, because it was very interesting to compare the different situations of the countries. You know, just to get back to Brazil, there is a regulation on agency work. It was adopted in 1974. It has never been revised, you know, one comma since then. And of course, since 1974, many things happened. And this is to show you that regulation is important, the right level of regulation, but you need also to update the regulation on a regular basis. So in some cases, we are calling for regulation, but when the regulation is outdated or had too many restrictions, unjustified restrictions, then the regulation should be adjusted and restrictions should be lifted. Russia was a very good example. No regulation. As of the 1st of January this year, we have a new law regulating agency work. But this law is good, but it's probably too restrictive. But we do think this is a better start, having a too restrictive law than no law. But of course, the objective will be, you know, after a while, then to review the regulation and to ask the Russian governments to make sure that the unjustified or non-useful restrictions are being lifted. India is another example, China also, but again, what we see is proper regulation being adopted and to be put in place. And I would just like to react to what the Secretary said about democracy, because there is also a link, actually, between the democratic regime of a country and the development of our industry. Actually, in most of the countries that are non-democratic, we were not allowed to operate, or we are still not allowed to operate. So there is also a link between the development of our industry and the characteristic of a democratic regime, as well as trade unions should be able to operate, freedom of association. We should be also able to operate and to be active in countries. And we provide freedom of choice in the labor market. So freedom usually goes with democracy. But back to the point on compliance and enforcement. On that one, I want to make a first strong statement, which is the fact that when it comes to enforcement of existing regulation, the first and primary responsibility for that is government, it's state. It's up to the states to make sure that the laws being in place are being enforced and complied with. So on that one, let's be clear. Of course, as Ciett, we are willing to help, to contribute, but the first and foremost priority lies with the governments. However, we do our part. Again, the Ciett Code of Conduct was mentioned, so we are also very keen on promoting self-regulation for our industry. As you know, we are also in favor of a licensing system for staffing companies to operate. And we've heard that in India, probably a licensing system will be adopted in the next couple of years. On that point, it might be good to stress that, first of all, in most of the countries where Ciett operates, we have licensing system. In some of these countries, the licensing system is being managed sometimes by the public employment services, sometimes by the government directly, the Minister of Labor, and sometimes with the unions, the trade unions. And I think this is maybe something also India could have a look at, how to involve the unions into the licensing system. This is something that works very well, for instance, in UK, in Belgium, in France, or in several countries, where trade unions are also involved in monitoring the licensing system. And then to conclude, and Pin said it, we were working very closely with the ILO, I think there is also another stakeholder that should be involved into that one, is the user companies. We can do our very best to comply with existing regulation. If at the end of the day our customers are not convinced that they need also to comply with regulation, things will not be moving forward. On that one, we are also, as Ciett, working closely with the IOE, the International Organization of Employers, on that one, so to educate them. And we have also a joint project via the IOM, the International Office of Migration, for implementing also standards for fair and ethical international recruitment practices. Again, involving the user companies to involve also our customers and educating them in also using the rights, the reputable agencies. Another interesting example, I think, is from the UK, where the REC also has been launching a specific campaign on educating our customers, the user companies, and also making sure that they are working with the right agencies. To conclude, I would like, yes, to stress again the role of Ciett into this topic of compliance and enforcement. And I think the first role of Ciett is, first of all, to help a better understanding of what are the issues at stake. And this is really our role. And for instance, as you know, we are about to publish a white paper on the future of work, trying to identify the key issues that policymakers and also our industry and also the trade unions will have to address in the future to adapt regulation on this changing world of work. The second one, of course, from our side is to then educate the policymakers, international level, regional level, national level, about these changes taking place. And finally, of course, because we want to contribute, we will issue some policy recommendations also to help governments to adopt the right level of regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denis. No, and I would say clearly a key topic for this industry at global level. To bring it back now to India, Ritu, let me look at you and ask you. You preside the International Staffing Federation, of course, the ISF, which is composed of local and, of course, also multinational companies. You've got existing and I hope a lot of future members, of course. When is this topic of regulation, enforcement, monitoring not on the agenda of your meetings, I guess, on the one hand side? And if you want to talk us also through the priorities that you see in that topic. Now, I was handed, this is not 7 pages, it's 180 pages, I think. So some report that the ISF, I believe, has supported in developing on issues and challenges in the context of private placement agencies in India. So clearly, the ISF very active in partnership with the other actors. But maybe your thoughts also on the self-regulation side. We heard about it. Please, Ritu.
Sure. So before I jump onto the regulation bit, I think it's important to set a context about the industry per se. So I had the privilege of getting my company listed earlier this year. And during the roadshow trip, when we were meeting some of the leading fund managers in New York, we were taking them through about the opportunity, the potential of this market in India. Of course, it's important. And one of them suddenly stood up and asked, we hear, this entire public advocacy campaign, you guys have been advocating for labor reform. To me, it seems like a suicide mission. Because if labor reform happens in this country, I believe staffing industry will be completely done away with, because there would not be a need for staffing. Now, it's very important for us to understand what we are talking about here. India is a country where almost 29 to 30% of the entire workforce are in some form of third-party outsourcing. And out of that number, which is about 129 million people in this country, only 1.5% of them are engaged in formal flexi staffing. In comparison, globally, that figure in any country is around 5 to 15%. We wish. And it differs, of course, but that's the average, which is there. And 100% of that number is formal. And hence, one of the things that we need to start looking at in India is that whenever we are going to engage in a debate around staffing, which is currently revolving around whether it's permanent versus contract. I think it's high time we let the focus shift from that to trying to have a debate around formal workforce versus informal workforce in India. The only way that we can change this tide, where 95% of the workforce is in the informal sector, is through a lighter, simplified touch of regulation in this country. Now, OECD in one of their researches have come out with this interesting report, which says that India is one of the most regulated markets in the world, and yet is one of the least protective in terms of the interest of the youth, which means these regulations, which were supposedly created to protect the interest of the youth, are really not achieving or fulfilling that purpose. And hence, what's the purpose? And maybe these regulations are coming in the way of job creation, and that is the agenda of the day. Now, the point that we have to focus on is that we have talked about initiatives like Make in India. Now, Make in India is about taking jobs to people, right? And which means we have to attract investments. We have to make sure that the jobs are not centered around the 11 cities, which as per the ISF report, where maximum employment generation is happening. We need to take jobs to each and every nook and corner of this country. It's not going to happen if labor reform doesn't lead the way, because that's going to be the carrot that one can show to get people to come and seriously stay interested in India. If that happens, what is going to happen? The transformation that's likely to happen is that that figure of 29% is definitely going to come down, yes? The total pie is definitely going to reduce. However, that 1.5% of, which is where the staffing industry is currently revolving around, is definitely going to go up. And what does that mean for the youth? Which means that not only 1.5% of the youth who would be coming under the protection of having decent pay, having all kinds of social security that they are entitled to, but a larger audience, which right now in this country has no such protection. So what we are essentially saying is that we need labor reform to get more and more youth have a formal job, have a decent job, have a livelihood that they're proud of, where they have security. And we believe staffing in India can actually drive that process in a big way. We have been engaging with the Ministry of Labor actively, and to be honest, over the last 2 years, this ministry has been a completely new avatar in itself. They've been proactive, they've been listening, and we've been working together to come up with a balanced set of recommendations which will help create a protected environment for the youth and yet a flexible environment for employers. We are not essentially, a lot of people believe that we are spokespeople or spokesperson for employers, not essentially. Our business cannot run if we are not balancing our responsibilities to the youth that we hire as well as our employers. And we are in a perfect position to actually go with an unbiased and a neutral view to the government in terms of the regulations that have to be made. National licensing is a regulation which has been inspired by the ILO 181, which we have gone specifically as an ask to the ministry. Shankar ji, of course, has patiently heard us out on that. And we're really fortunate when we hear that it's going to be incorporated into the draft code. So I think as ISF, what we can talk about is that we are here a team of people which has been actually propagating a very fair employment status for our youth. Incidentally, the average salary that we do pay to our temps is 1.5 times the minimum wage which is there existing currently. It's about 15,000, which is in any case, without any mandate, without any design, without any regulations, has gone up to that level. So I think in submission and in conclusion, Bettina, I think the national licensing at this point of time is probably going to be the most critical regulation that can be in place to eradicate the mom and pop shops which keep coming up like mushrooms all over, and somebody becomes a contractor. If we do that, the current struggle of which, of course, Virjesh ji and Virjesh, all other trade unions have a problem with in terms of exploitation and discrimination can be done away with. That's what I have to say.
Thank you so much, and that was quite a bit, and your passion, of course, is undoubting in here. I'm afraid those sometimes you preach to the converted, if I may say, but no, definitely something, and good to hear the ISF is taking, maybe in summary, a step-by-step approach, if I can say here, but the licensing system, no doubt, an important next step. Let me turn to you. It's about high time that we talk about the workers' side, isn't it? Because of course, the convention does, in Article 2, say that a purpose of the convention is to allow the operation of private employment agencies, as well as the protection of the workers, using the services within the framework of provisions. Now, Virjesh, you're the Secretary General of All India. So I have the strong assumption that monitoring and enforcement of regulation is key for you. So we don't have to get into that, if I may say. But from All India's perspective, what is key for you now that you know this convention? What are the key elements that need to be looked at right now, knowing the entire framework we just discussed?
Thank you, ma'am. Dear panelists, brothers and sisters, I am worker representative. I belongs to trade unions. So I am at the receiving end. What actually practically comes there, that I would like to put before all you. In my opinion, simply this legislation, enactment or ratification of conventions will not work. We have to think beyond that. In today's, especially in global economy, role of staffing agencies is much more important. But what practically we are experiencing there? Role of staffing agencies has become, now they are known practically as a middleman between the workman and the industry, those who are using them. And the term of work, this middleman, is not a decent one or graceful in the society. So I think staffing agencies, instead of working as a middleman, they should be translate themselves into a parental role, parent of a workman. Otherwise, still we have lot of legislation, many enactment, many rules are there. The basic problem is enforcement of that one, implementation of that one. Until unless rules with ethics will not be implemented, I think having number of rules is not going to serve the purpose. So basic, very fundamental requirement for staffing agencies is to convert themselves, at least they have to show that they have converted themselves, they are practicing, acting as a parent of the workman. Otherwise, what is happening? Workers are being taken up and being supplied there. What is happening to them? I think no one is from the staffing agencies are going them to ask practically what is happening. They are all rights. They are not allowed to form trade union, association, their minimum wage, their social security. So practically what we are experiencing, a little bit, some more exercise is required with the ethics, then only we can find our role in an appropriate manner. Second one is government's role is also. Now number of agencies, staffing agencies are coming up, growing up. And most of them, they are misleading to the workers. Yesterday I got a telephone call from our friend from Pune. He has been offered job in ICICI Bank and he has been asked to deposit 20,000. He deposited. Then another call, you again deposit 30,000. He deposited 30,000 also. Then you deposit 50,000 and come at Delhi and take the appointment letter. Then he called us, that agency is somewhere in Delhi, you please find out. So this type of agencies are working there. So if government is not coming forward, you see, in today's time, government can't provide employment to all. This staffing agencies has a greater role to play to provide the employment and to skill them. Many more things there came. Regulation, governance, it is for government, and if government is not coming to check them, now there is no site, no public domain where you can find which are the authentic, authorized staffing agencies, where one will go, and which sort of job they are offering, what job are there, what are the service conditions. So this should be come in very transparent manner, otherwise these practices is not going to serve the purpose. It has become a trade of human. We should look into humanistic angle. They are human, they are mankind. With kindness, we should deal with them. So this type of approach, if it is not there, and one more issue is there, especially in India, this convention 181, I think it is a mix of 3-4 conventions. Migrant worker and many more, they are there. And some of them we are practicing since long, especially in India. Only labor ministry can't find, can't do, can't monitor all these. There is a role of Ministry of External Affairs. There is a role of Ministry of Commerce. They are dealing with the trade. Ministry of Law, we have suggested government, there should be umbrella organization like where mix of Commerce Ministry, External Affairs Ministry, Labor Ministry, being a nodal ministry, this Labor Ministry, in present scenario in Indian context, they are not sufficient enough, their authorities, their power, their dealing to deal all the matters, especially in the globalized era and everything. So until unless there is a mix, there is an umbrella organization, there is a coordination between all the dealing ministries, it will be difficult to address these concerns. So what I think, practically we want to make it a real one, all stakeholders should be involved in the dealing, from policy formulation to implementation level. Workers' representatives should also be there for their grievance reversal, for all their facilities. In staffing agencies, board, at their managerial level, everywhere. You see now government has gone to include panchayat members, they have given liberty to deal all this, just to make them satisfied that whatever you are doing for yourself, it is you only who are doing. And for ours concern, for workers concern, we are struggling. If it is, anything is being designed for us, let us be part of that policy formulation to implementation. We are nowhere. So for their satisfaction and to make it transparent, you keep workers representative also, then you can ensure the implementation, enforcement with the transparency. Otherwise, you see, workers are handicapped now. They have no other way out. They can't generate job themselves. They are dependent upon you. If you will not have a humanistic angle, if you will treat them like a trade of human trade like, there is no option. And I think we all means government, staffing agency and trade union. We all have got a role to work in a tandem, work together. Then we can enforce all these. Ethics has to play a greater role. Until unless ethics is not there, no legislation, no enactment will work. So with these aspects, if we will deal with this, we can address the concern of whatever agenda is given to us. With this, I think as a trade union, we are very much interested to be part of this, to make it success with all this one, with all our support. With these, I think, and thanks.
Thank you very much, Virjesh. And indeed, you don't, I mean, it's not about being interested. You have to be part. You have no choice, actually. Notably as well because, of course, the ILO process is tripartite. So in any case, as I said, it's not a choice. We need you there. I think with all you've said, probably, and the good thing is there will be no questions because all of them have been answered by a panelist and the last one's there as well. But I just really wanted to come back to the convention again, those 7 pages, because a good summary of what the worker protection is about is actually in the convention, isn't it? It says right to freedom of association and the right to bargain. It says equality of opportunity. It says processing of personal data. It says clearly, j'y arrive, no child labor. The convention says clearly protection of migrant workers. And black on white, ladies and gentlemen, Article 7, the convention says private employment agencies shall not charge directly or indirectly, in whole or in part, any fees or costs to workers. So I would say that is a great summary in future for you if you would like to use that. But now, ladies and gentlemen, let us close this with, I think, one of the highlights of the day. To have you here among us, I believe, is fantastic. One of the rock stars in India, I believe. You've been working with one of the powerhouses in this country. So, of course, Mekin, thank you for being on this panel as well. And what we really look for to hear from you is what drove you in your choices when you went for private employment agencies to manage that incredible demand that your company Flipkart created. What were the criteria? And of course, talking about regulation and etc., what would have been most useful for you to really make sure that you could operate?
Thank you. So first of all, it's an honor to be here, to be addressing in the World Employment Conference with myself currently being unemployed. So I used to be leading the HR department at Flipkart till 2 months back, and have since decided to move on and hope to make an impact in the field of education, which I believe is, like the Secretary mentioned, amongst the biggest needs for the country. So I think the only piece that qualifies me to be sitting here in this panel is that I witnessed the journey that a small company made in growing rapidly over the last 6 years. And I think, so first, the fact that a small company could actually make that kind of a journey reflects, I think, multiple Ds of what the Secretary mentioned, right? That the power of opportunity being available to innovators who can come in and create things, flexibility to be able to create value for businesses and grow, and create employment for tens of thousands of people. I think with that as the backdrop and the fact that I'm very proud of all of this, I do want us to get better, right? So I would focus most of my conversation on what are the things that we could possibly think about here on, keeping that balance in mind. I think for enforcement and monitoring of regulation, the first piece, and I think multiple panel members here have hinted at it, is simplification. Right? That the regulation and the guidelines have to be simple enough for them to be understood by multiple stakeholders and then to be enforced. I also believe that we have to have active thought around modernization. And let me explain what I mean by modernization. That as multiple panels before, earlier in the day talked about, that the kind of employment is rapidly getting shifted. The rate of change in the world that technology and other global forces are driving is rapidly changing the task. But I don't think we have as rapidly shifted our definitions of employment or of what does it mean to be working or not working. I think there were examples of Uber or Ola drivers pointed out in the morning, and they're relevant examples that, hey, do you consider them as employees? Do you not? What would it take for them to become part of the formal workforce, right? And I think, to me, that's far more important, so that they come under this ambit. Otherwise, 90% stay outside of the formal part of our workforce, meaning they have very little protection. They don't get the opportunities or even become aware of what is possible in an industry. So simplification and modernization, which leads to this happening. Let me actually make this a little more real with a mini story about a journey we went through. At Flipkart, we had, from a business point of view, we run something called a Big Billion Day. For people who are familiar with the US markets, it's like the Black Friday. For those familiar with the Chinese market, it is like the Singles Day that Alibaba runs, which is on one single day, you have massive sale. You have manufacturers coming in together to create offers. You have a large volume of customers coming in and buying. Now, once the customers have bought in large volumes, you cannot have them wait for a long time, so you need to deliver those products. So the workforce required to deliver those products in the next 10 to 15 days is 10 to 15 times, sometimes, of your regular workforce. And now it's very hard to figure out a way in which we can do this with our current regulations. And which is where, as in partners like Team Lee's come into play, and who are able to create ways in which, in a compliant and caring way, they're able to create opportunities and meet this demand and supply. But I believe that further simplification can actually lead to many more such business opportunities coming up, where people are not necessarily bound by very formal and somewhat archaic definitions of what a job is or what employment is, and are able to adapt to whether it is being an online tutor or an Uber driver or working in the Big Billion Day for 6 days or setting up the Kumbh Mela for a month. All of these are forms of work that don't necessarily follow the regular definitions of employment. And we should think about how can we make our definitions simpler so that a lot of this actually gets included and doesn't fall out of the ambit.
Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid to say that all good things have to come to an end. And as I've just remarked earlier, there can be no questions after this fantastic panel. I guess it's my duty now to really thank you, dear distinguished panelists, for taking the time for being here with us. And I would say as a personal remark, to wrap it all up, clearly on this topic there is a necessity, there are the tools, and there is the willingness as well to act. And I would say, why doesn't India on this topic take up the possibility to be a leader as well when it comes to enforcing and monitoring? So thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Bettina, for sticking on to the time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please do give them a huge round of applause. A very important session, and the last session of our conference, which was on how to monitor and enforce regulations on private employment agencies. And we would definitely like to present them with a token of appreciation, for which may I please invite on stage Mr. Shashi Kumar, Director Sales, Indeed, to kindly come on stage and present our esteemed panelists with a token of appreciation. Starting with Ms. Bettina. Mr. Shankar Aggarwal. Mr. Virjesh Upadhyay. Ms. Panudda Boonpala. Ms. Rituparna Chakraborty. Denis. and Mekin. Thank you so much. I request all our esteemed panelists to kindly step forward for a group photograph, and Mr. Kumar, we request you to be on stage for the photo. Thank you so much. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of